Welcome to Around the World with Dane Waters, and I'm your host, Dane Waters. Another week, another war, violence. I love the fact that when Donald Trump said that, when he was running for president, he said there will be no wars, no wars, no wars. I love it. I mean, it's gonna be the greatest time in America's history with no wars. And then he starts talking about I deserve the Nobel Peace Prize because I've ended wars and I've ended wars. And guess what? I mean, it's more, I don't know. I guess maybe Iran, attacking Iran is not a war. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some kind of definition, new definition. Like I remember when his first administration, Kellyanne Conway came out with alternative facts. Maybe the next thing we'll be hearing is it's alternative war. I don't know. We'll figure something about it, but it's as I've made it very clear many times, that, I am a supporter of regime change in Iran. I mean, just be very clear about that. But it's just, how we go about these things. I was a supporter of regime change in Venezuela, but it's all about how we go about it. I mean, there's the right way and the wrong way. Now, what's the old saying? Violence begets violence. It's just crazy. I have friends throughout the Middle East, and it's just hard to understand exactly the logic of actually what the Iranians are doing as far as attacking everybody. But I think a lot of it has to do is people have to understand. They're like, why are they attacking, Riyadh and Saudi Arabia? Well, you have a huge difference between Sunnis and Shias. There's a whole issue there that, we'll talk about on the show. But anyway, back to global news real quick. Outside the war in the Middle East, which we'll be talking about today and next week. Um, there's, I don't know, is there anything else going on in the world to talk about? I'm not really sure, but no, there is. We'll be talking to our friends in the UK to talk about what's happening there. Jeffrey Epstein is still rearing his ugly head in the United States, getting ready for midterm elections. I think that the Democrats are fully expecting to take over the House. It's going to be interesting to see how the war plays into it. I think that this is a gift politically for the Democrats in the United States. I hate to say war is a gift to anybody, but it is because I do believe that they will use it as an opportunity to talk about how Donald Trump does not live up to any of his promises. He really doesn't. It's a strange world. I just don't get it. I really don't. Anyway, I know my rambling. Everyone just wakes up and there and around the world just want to listen to my rambling. But what we're going to do now is that we're going to take a quick break from Around the World with Dane Waters, and we're going to be back so I can ramble even more with my first guest. Thank you.
What we've always maintained is that the Nevertron movement. I'll break it down a bit. Syria, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of illegal ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote for it at all.
Silverbird Television, the revolution that transformed the TV landscape. We stormed the airwaves in 2003, shattering expectations and setting the pace for others to follow. On Music Africa, we provided a platform for the birth and growth of Afro beats. With a relentless pursuit of excellence, we created a world of limitless entertainment where every moment is unforgettable. We ignited childhood wonder, fueled sports passions, celebrated African rhythm, and made movie nights a family tradition. Today, Silverbird Television stands tall, a household name synonymous with quality, creativity, and innovation. We are the trailblazers, the trendsetters, and the heartbeat of entertainment, unmatched, unbeatable, unstoppable. Silverbird Television, we are awesome.
What we've always maintained is that the Nevertron movement. I'll break it down a bit. Syria, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of illegal ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote for it at all.
Okay, welcome back. Around the World with Dane Waters. I am honored, as always, to have Thomas Munson with me from the UK. Welcome, Thomas. How are you this morning?
I'm about as good as you can be, considering everything going on in the world right now, Dane.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Once again, I be very clear. I'm not a guy opposed to war. I'm not, but I think there should be a logic behind war. I think there should be a rationale behind war. But let's just start specifically with the UK. Now, well, I want to ask you this question. As a Brit, what do you think about the war? Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I think that the sense is that America's kind of gone in, sort of slightly gun ho. It doesn't seem like a well thought out plan. And the consequences of that are now that the UK has been dragged into another conflict, whether they like it or not. So I think, as we've discussed on this show before, I say that maybe there's a growing resentment towards America, particularly the Trump administration in the UK. I think that actions like this, taken sort of recklessly, only serve to compound that resentment and that tension that's growing between the two countries now.
Well, okay, so when you're talking about originally Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, said we're not going to provide access to our military facilities for this war, but now he's changed his mind and said we're allowing access for defensive measures. I mean, so what's up with Starmer? I mean, what is the official position of the government these days?
Yeah, I mean, so it's an interesting one. In the past, and again, this is something that we've discussed too, when the United States has undertaken operations in the Middle East, particularly recently when it sort of targeted terrorist groups like the Houthis, who are, of course, an Iranian proxy, the UK has worked with the United States in those instances. I think, obviously, where this is different, or where it can seem to be different, is, as you said at the top of the show, is this is much further than just sort of a military strike. This is a full-on war, essentially. And so the position of the UK, largely because of a hangover, if you will, from 2003, the Iraq War, is that we don't want to get involved in any more all-out wars in the Middle. Where Starmer's hand has been forced a bit, and actually I think it was quite controversial at the time that he didn't allow UK bases to be used, even if we weren't directly involved ourselves. Where his hand has been forced, and it took a bit of time as well. He didn't do it straight away, allowing the US to use the bases for defensive purposes, is Iran's attacks on the Gulf region. So not a lot of people necessarily know this outside the UK, but there are around 300,000 British citizens live in the Gulf. And so actually quite an important part of British security involves ensuring the security of the Gulf region. And it was actually, as well as pressure from the United States, pressure from our Gulf allies that in the end forced our hand, forced Starmer's hand, I should say, who was very reluctant to provide support in providing those access to those bases. But to go even further, there have been attacks on Cyprus, or certainly Cyprus has been targeted. We've got British troops based at the moment. We've got a British RAF base, Royal Air Force base there. And our naval presence there is more or less non-existent. We've not taken any action to defend there. In fact, Greece has sent naval vessels to protect Cyprus. And so it seems that Starmer is very much taking the path of least resistance, or not so much the path of least resistance, but seems to be doing the bare minimum when it comes to this conflict.
Well, we were talking, I was talking about in my monologue. I mean, a lot of people are trying to figure out, why Iran, an Arab nation, Middle Eastern nation, is lobbing bombs to like Kuwait and UAE and Cyprus and Saudi Arabia and places like this. I mean, it just seems a scattershot. I think it's two things. I think one is that their military leadership has basically been annihilated, so people are just have access to these launchers and just launching. But also, I think we need to understand that there's a difference between Sunnis and Shias, where one of the greatest divide in the Middle East, the reason the Iran-Iraq war was fought was the Shias, which are basically Iranians, and the Sunnis, which are Iraqis. we're fighting. And I think that a lot of the where missiles have been sent by the Iranian regime or to Sunni countries, and basically saying, listen, we're going to make it very clear that we, as a Shia power, maintain that power. But as far as back to the UK, I mean, one of my greatest concerns is the fact that there is no exit strategy. But I want to come back to that. Is that it's going to increase terrorism against Western assets. I mean, do people in the UK, are they concerned that this war is going to increase terrorist activity in the country?
Well, on that, I tend to take a slightly different view, actually. So Iran, as you'll be aware, is one of the largest, in fact, the largest state sponsor of global terrorism. And so, take the UK as a specific example. Between 2022 and 2024, there were around 20 terrorist plots planned by the Iranian regime that were all foiled, thankfully, by MI5. So Iran has consistently tried to perpetuate terrorism in the United Kingdom. I think that while you may have some lone actors who are inspired to take part in an act of terrorism as a result of this, I think that generally speaking, regime change in Iran and what's going on in Iran at the moment will likely lead to less terrorism globally in the long term.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, we saw there was an attack. Well, we are not sure about this, but there was an attack in Austin, Texas yesterday or day before yesterday. They think it's a lone gunman, but who knows? But when the Iran, the religious leaders of Iran are calling for a jihad around the world against Westerners, I mean, it's something we have to take. I mean, we look at how many Muslims are there in the world? Probably a billion. I mean, not putting them all together. I mean, the reality is, if a jihad is being called for, listen, even if 1/10 of 1% of them to take that jihad up, it is a concern. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not anti-Muslim by any stretch of the imagination. This is about Iran and the regime there calling for a jihad. Now, whether or not people pick up arms and do something about it, we don't know. But as far as the war itself, I mean, what I'm trying to struggle with is, what is the exit strategy? I mean, what is Secretary of State Rubio apparently was briefing members of Congress and talking about how we were kind of pushed into it by the Israelis. What do you have an idea and a thought on what the exit strategy would be? And what do you see? What do you see as victory, I guess, for the Americans and for the West?
Marco Rubio is the next Shah, I think, is the idea. No.
He has every other title in the administration. Why don't we give him Shah? You never know.
Exactly that. I don't think there is an exit strategy really from the Trump administration. I mean, the campaign is called, Project Epic Fury, and so I can't imagine many military operations called Epic Fury that have led to democracy building. I think it's really more of a vanity project for Trump. Really, he just wants to be able to say at the end of his presidency, assuming that he lives to the end of his presidency, that his legacy has been to have regime change in Iran, or at least to have toppled the Ayatollah and to take out Maduro in Venezuela. If I was a dictator anywhere in any country in the world right now, I'd be kind of feeling a little bit hot under the collar. I don't know what Kim Jong-un's thinking right now, but he's probably getting a little bit worried, But in terms of an exit strategy, I'm not sure that there is one. And I think that's part of the reason, and I think there are other political reasons too, which I can touch on, that Keir Starmer's been reluctant to back this campaign. He said in Parliament yesterday he doesn't support regime change from the skies. And I think that he sees that there isn't really a realistic exit plan. In terms of the politics of it, if I can touch on that for a second, and I know that previously when we were talking, we mentioned this recent by-election as well. We have to remember that the Labour Party, a big part of their coalition is the Muslim population living in the UK. And there will undoubtedly be members of the Muslim population in the UK who are supportive of these actions. There have been some people celebrating in the streets, actually, in the UK, the sort of Iranian diaspora living here. But there will also be other members of the Muslim population in this country who are very much opposed to Western intervention in the Middle East and regime change. And so Keir Starmer's walking a bit of a tightrope in that regard, because his list of friends are running thin, and he doesn't want to risk alienating even more of his base.
Well, no, I mean you're right. I mean, I think there's a very large Muslim population in the UK, and it is from a, and I would argue that they're definitely more Labour related than they are Tory or Reform Party. There's no doubt about that. So that's just a political reality. Just like in the United States, you talk about the Jewish population. I mean, they have a very large control over. Well, I wouldn't say over, but they have influence within the Republican Party. There's definitely there's that, but when we talk about exit strategy, and what's interesting when you just said what about Starmer saying that he does not support regime change from the air. Okay, well, I mean, honestly, there's been no regime change has ever happened just from an air campaign. That's just historically it's never happened. And I would argue that I mean, one thing Trump was hoping for is that he called for the Iranians to overthrow their government. But the reality is, if he had helped them 2 months ago when they were in the street, there would have been a greater chance of that. But you don't see that type of mass protest right now. And I know I'm talking about because this is just such a complex issue. And the actual killing of Khomeini, not Khomeini. I mean, is it? I mean, that is, and as Trump's going to come out and say that it was the Israelis who actually did it versus the Americans. I mean, so it's a difference without a, without a difference. I can't remember. But I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, I don't see regime change happening under this scenario. I mean, I just don't. I mean, they haven't taken out the rest of the leadership. But from a UK standpoint, I mean, where does Nigel Farage, has he come out and said anything?
Yeah, so Nigel Farage was extremely critical of Keir Starmer, as you might expect. Early on, he just said that we should have immediately granted access to our air bases for the operation, which I think is actually, I mean, I don't tend to agree with Nigel Farage very often, but I think is a defensible position anyway. But actually, what's interesting is something that's really dominated UK politics recently, and it's something that Nigel Farage has talked about a lot, is about the Chagos Islands, of course. So you have an airbase there. That's currently UK territory. It's something that the UK is in talks to give to Mauritius. And actually, the Trump administration's actually been quite critical of that decision. And the fact that this is one of the bases that the Trump administration has wanted to use for this campaign, I think really moves that conversation around the Chagos Islands even further up the food chain and list of sort of topics of conversation that we need to be having. And Farage is somebody who has always said that we shouldn't be handing over sovereignty to Mauritius. And I think from a security point of view, and potentially even a historic point of view, the Chagos Islands have actually never historically belonged to Mauritius. That's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realise when we're having this conversation. That maybe in this particular instance.
I'll have to quote you on that because I didn't think I'd ever hear you saying Nigel Farage was correct about anything. So, and for the viewers around the world, I mean, I do have this prediction that in the next general election in the UK, I think that Reform Party will do quite well, and I think that Nigel Farage has a chance of, being the next prime minister of the country. But from the Tory side, I mean, where do the Tories stand on this in the UK?
I think actually quite similarly aligned to Farage. So, in fact, I think Kemi Badenoch went a step further yesterday and didn't just say that she would have granted access to the bases, but that she would have actually instructed the Royal Air Force to join this operation as well. So that's a slightly different position too. But then I'm not surprised. I mean, I think the Conservative Party has probably, I think they're not sullied by having been in charge when the Iraq War happened. And so I think that it's a bit easier for conservatives in this country to campaign for foreign intervention in a way that maybe it's a bit more difficult for Labour to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that I think that it's interesting to see what's going to happen. I mean, as far as I mean, and I do say there is a key strategic difference than saying we will grant access to our military bases than saying, hey, we will participate in the conflict. Now, just hopefully no British planes are flying over Kuwait these days because the Kuwaitis shot down 3 American planes,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. Which just says, hey, the Kuwaits have a great air defense system. Which, by the way, we America paid for. So our own missiles are shooting down our own planes. But that being said, I mean, I do want to touch on, we got a couple of minutes here. I do want to touch on a couple of things in the UK while we can. I mean, there is, first of all, I have to talk about real quick about Jeffrey Epstein and what, the fact since the last time we spoke, former Prince Andrew has been arrested and Mendelsohn have been arrested, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And they're both in slightly different circumstances. Andrew was brought in for questioning while his properties were being searched. As I understand it, there isn't any action that's expected to be taken for a considerable amount of time, because there are still files that are probably needed to build any serious case of prosecution that are still either redacted or haven't been released. So the expectation is that if any action was taken against Andrew, it would be a number of years before that happened. However, it was unprecedented for, even though he's been stripped of his titles, of course, he's still the member of the royal family. It's the first time in modern history that a member of the full royal family is arrested for anything. And then with the case with Lord Mandelson is actually slightly more exciting. So he was being investigated already, and as I understand it, he'd agreed to a voluntary interview with the police. However, the Speaker of the House, the UK House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, was on a trip as part of his duties as Speaker of the House overseas. I think it might have been the Bahamas or somewhere like that, or the Virgin Islands. And he heard locally that they were expecting Mandelson to turn up there. And so he notified Met Police because the concern was he might be a flight risk. And he was planning to abscond to the Virgin Islands. And that's why he was arrested as quickly as he was. To prevent him leaving the country. These are claims, I should say, that Lord Mandelson denies strenuously and says are baseless. But that was certainly it was a very dramatic build up to his arrest.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is one thing I have to be very clear about is that the arrest of Randy, I shouldn't say it that way, Prince Andrew, and Mandelson are not sex related. It's because they supposedly gave up state secrets to Epstein, because there's still a lot of unknown, like how he got his wealth and all that kind of stuff. Listen, Thomas, I'd love to continue talking because the world is a crazy place, right? I mean, it's just getting nuttier by the day. It's going to be interesting. I wonder if Donald Trump, real last question, do you think Donald Trump is going to actually ask for the Nobel Peace Prize this next year?
Oh, undoubtedly. Or he'll make his own Peace Prize and give it to himself. There'll be something like that.
I think that's exactly what he'll do. He's like the Board of Peace to take over the United Nations. He's not going to have the Trump Peace Prize. I think you're exactly spot on about that, Tom.
Classic Trump style.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for being with us today. I do appreciate it. It's always great talking to you. Anyway, thanks for being with Around the World with Dane Waters. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with our next guest. Thanks a lot.